Hello, welcome back. It's Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony here to give you the April update on YouTube. Hope you're doing well. It's crazy energy going on right now. We've still got the Venus and Mercury retrograde going on, but as you can see here, two of the things on deck here for this month are both Mercury and Venus turning direct. So we're going to get into this list here. It's a pretty potent list for this month. There's a lot going on, obviously. But a lot of these things are linked, and we're going to see that when we start looking at the charts. That these are put down here as separate energies, but when we look at the charts for each one, it's going to bring back the same themes in a lot of cases, with the exception of the new moon in Taurus at the end of the month. It's really the only outlier, whereas everything else is kind of related to each other in that they're aspecting each other and such. So we'll start at the top here. So Saturn, it is in late Pisces, sextiling Uranus in the late Taurus, about 25 degrees or so, for about 4 weeks, late March. It started just like last week. Today is March 31st, Monday, and it's going to continue for the first few weeks of April. And this will be with us for a little while. So the first aspect with the sextile with these two planets starts here. It'll come back in August when they are both in different signs. Saturn will have moved into Aries, Uranus will have moved into Gemini, and then they'll make their final sextile in January of 2026 back into these signs again. So Saturn will be back in Pisces, Uranus back in Taurus. So it is more of a overarching background energy. And so we'll take a look at the chart for that. There's Saturn right here. Here is Uranus. And note that both Saturn and Uranus are the co-rulers of the sign of Aquarius. Okay, so Saturn is the classic ruler, whatever you want to call it, and then Uranus is the more modern ruler. Okay, and so I wanted to highlight Pluto and Aquarius over here as well, because it is sort of like this slow engagement, almost like it's anchoring in the Pluto and Aquarius energy in a sense. Okay, and so that seemed pretty significant to me. And this, just Saturn and Uranus in general is basically like this slow in deliberate change. So in permanent change too. Okay, so Uranus wants crazy changes all the time, etc. But it's in Taurus, so it's a little subdued. And Saturn here in Pisces is basically just like guiding that Uranian energy so that it doesn't change things too much or disrupt things too much. Okay, so there is a sense of gradual change going on, personally and collectively, with the theme of Pluto and Aquarius in the background. Okay, so this is coming into individual sovereignty, etc. And so that again, that will be with us till early January, right up until just before Saturn meets with Neptune at 0 degrees Aries in February of 2026. And note Saturn is pretty close to both Venus retrograde and the Moon's North Node in late Pisces during the sextile, at least the initial sextile that happens here this spring. And so watch for these to come up here later in this video as well. The same theme is cluster. This stellium in Pisces essentially is going to be a big part of the picture. And so there's a sense of getting ready to move forward. So once those little R's there, that's the retrograde indicator. Once those are gone, and both Venus and Mercury are direct, there's a sense that the car is in motion essentially, and we're starting to move forward. So the next thing on the list here, we have to go back a couple of days. Yesterday, actually, Neptune entered Aries on March 30th, and Neptune will be in Aries through late October, and for about 3 months, it'll back to the 29th degree of Pisces till late January. So pretty much that same time that the Saturn sextile Uranus ends in January, that's when Neptune will make its final entry into Aries in late January as well. So for the most part, for the next 14 years, other than those 3 months, Neptune will be in Aries. So it's been in Pisces since it entered in 2011 for about 4 months. And then in February of 2012, that is when Neptune entered Pisces, where it had been until yesterday morning. So long trek through the sign of Pisces. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, so it was in its own sign. So we kind of had an amplification of Neptunian and Piscean themes. So that does include a definite spiritual awakening on a large scale, but also karma and going through things, having to go through muddy waters, not be able to see clearly where things are headed, etc. I think one of the best things that came out of Neptune and Pisces would be memes. Prior to like 2011 or so, you really didn't see memes that much. they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so a meme is worth a little bit more, right? Because you're adding words to an image, right? And so I feel like memes, it's a way of summing up information with just a photo and a phrase, and it says so much. To me, that's kind of like the art of Neptune and Pisces on a positive note. On the negative note, it has been a lot of deception that has gone on over the years. I won't get too deep into that for this talk. I'm actually going to give a talk on April 11th for the San Diego Astrological Society, talking about Saturn conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees Aries and what, former Saturn Neptune cycles, and then what the next one is going to be about. And I'll get deeply into the deceptions that have gone on with Neptune and Pisces at that point. But anyway, just to look at the chart here, and just to note, Neptune and Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so this really is like a brand new spiritual journey, essentially. Like we've completed certain spiritual reality, and now we're about to start something new. It's really about individuation too of spirituality. So it's kind of putting us into our sovereignty. Like everything really is related to moving into sovereignty with the outer planets, with Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune into Aries. This really is about individuating our spiritual perceptions of reality. Okay, and it's about bringing in our whole selves into this life. Okay, if you ever heard of the phrase by Rumi, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean contained in one drop. Think of Neptune as the entire ocean, Aries as the drop. Okay, and so Neptune is trying to drip itself into our awareness. So there might also be movements, spiritual movements that start during this Neptune and Aries phase through the year 2039. It's, just because of that initiation energy that we're dealing with Neptune and Aries. And it's just, I think a lot of people on an individual level just coming into their own. Why did you come here? What is the purpose for this life? That's where I think Neptune and Pisces has been very confusing the last, 13, 14 years or so. There can be a sense of drifting and not knowing exactly what we're here for. Neptune and Aries has a way of kind of reminding us why we're here. So just to take a quick glance at that, there is Neptune at 0 degrees Aries, okay? And the ruler of Aries, Mars, over here in Cancer. And notice, again, like I said, there's a lot of these things are connecting. Notice that is highlighting that sextile between Saturn and Uranus that we just talked about, okay? So the ruler of Aries, which is the sign that Neptune just entered, is kind of reminding us of that Saturn-Uranus sextile. Again, reminding us that we're in a phase of gradual and permanent change that is more deliberate and less surprising, etc. That Mars is also squaring Chiron in Aries, which is right next to the moon in Aries at the time that Neptune entered Aries. Okay, so there is a sense of like urgency, emotional urgency, with the shift of Neptune into Aries. Okay, and I think it's going to be a very noticeable difference. That's really what it comes down to, the energy, the difference between Neptune and Pisces, Neptune and Aries. And so we'll see how that unfolds as, again, the ocean drips its way in over the coming weeks to months, etc. So next on the list. So this is exciting. April 7th, and then just 5 days later, on April 12th, Venus will follow Mercury turning direct. Okay, and what's interesting about this one down here, Venus direct, Venus is the ruler of Libra, and it's about 40 minutes after this full moon in Libra on the 12th, Venus turns direct. So that really, to me, that closes out the eclipse season, that closes out these both retrogrades, Mercury and Venus. And notice how Mercury and Venus are very similar degrees. They're only 2 degrees apart when they go direct. Okay, so again, they're all part of that same cluster in Pisces, that stellium that's going on there. And so how does Mercury direct look on April 7th here? Here's a chart. Where is Mercury? There it is. Okay, there's Mercury in Pisces, and notice it's right on the north node. That's if you're using the mean node. True node might be just a little bit off of that, but either way, they're pretty close to each other. So this really has a sense of the retrograde period has been a time of being ready to go forward, but then having to go back and consider certain things, release certain things that are holding us back. Okay, and at this point, there's a sense of it's a decision-making time. Like it's go time. Now we can move forward. So Mercury with Saturn, with retrograde Venus, which is, only 5 days away from turning direct at that point, they're all in a little cluster within a degree of each other. Okay. So there is a sense that our heads and our hearts are in alignment, and we've had to like go through a review process on those levels to make sure that the decisions we're about to make are the right ones, because there's going to be a lot of permanence associated with those decisions. That's what Saturn sitting on that North Node. There's a sense of like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Okay, and there's like a no going back kind of energy. Like it's not a time for wavering and being unsure. It's a time to really decide and make it happen. And then I highlighted Uranus and Mars in there because just because they're, just to remind us of that connection there, that Mars is stimulating this gradual change that's going to happen over time. So we're kind of locking in here starting in April with where we're going to head forward. It's not going to all happen overnight. The idea being that we're going to be committed. That's probably a pretty good word to use there with Saturn. There's a sense of committing to a certain trajectory at this point. Okay. So next on the list, we've got that full moon in Libra. Like I said, this literally happens 40 minutes later. So these kind of happens all at once, if we want to look at it that way. But there's that full moon. It just looks, the sun is opposite the moon. It's just crowded over here, so they have to stretch it. But it's at 23 degrees Aries. The full moon is at 23 degrees Libra. Ruler of Libra is Venus, like we said, and Venus 40 minutes later will be moving direct, and it'll be moving direct with Saturn and the North Node, and Mercury's pretty close by. The idea being, it's kind of like we're making a choice with our heads first, and then our hearts are going to fill in essentially. So we're think of Mercury turning direct as like creating the container, and then Venus turning direct being filling in the container, right? So we're about to move forward with our hearts, essentially based on what we're deciding. We're making a decision, and then we're moving forward, trusting our hearts with that decision. Okay, in that full moon in Libra, it's like we've gotten to a point of sovereignty at this point, because we finished up the Libra Aries series of eclipses over the last year and a half to 2 years or so, and we've leveled up to a certain level of sovereignty where we've got strong boundaries. We know where we end and others begin. And so now we're capable of making certain agreements with others, okay? And we can do that without the fear of losing ourselves in that agreement. And notice that Chiron is exactly opposite the moon in that sense. So it really is a time of bringing up what needs to be healed and releasing it, essentially, okay? So we're graduating essentially on that level. We're really where any wounds we had in terms of our sovereignty, in terms of our independence, we're at a point where we can face and heal those wounds because we're confident in our independence now. Okay, and that's what that's going to bring up. And notice how that moon is also going to square Mars in Cancer. Mars is getting ready to leave Cancer. Finally, it's been floating around in a sign that it doesn't really like all that much. A little bit too emotional for Mars, but it has given us a chance to kind of slow down and not take drastic actions in so many sense. And then when it does get into Leo, then it's going to be the appropriate time to move forward with confidence, etc. But for now, this full moon can really bring up, again, all that needs to be healed. So it can be a pretty emotional full moon, and that goes along the lines of the idea of our hearts lining up with the decisions that we're making going forward and committing to that. So there's a sense of going all in. Okay, that's kind of like the phrase that wants to come in. There's a sense of if we're going, we're going, and we're going all in. Okay, Jupiter's also lightly aspecting. It's got a wide trine to that moon. So this is really speaking to the idea of once we make those decisions, this kind of gentle background energy of opening us up to like different options. Okay, now that we said yes, what are the options moving forward with that yes? Okay, and there might be some things we have to choose from. Okay, so that full moon again, and then to me this signifies the end of this eclipse season that we just went through, and obviously because Venus is going direct, it's the end of that retrograde. So this will be a little brief because this is pretty much the same chart right? Because the same things are happening. But if we're just looking at Venus in isolation, so yes, it goes direct right after that full moon. The moon's still at the same degree of Libra when 40 minutes later when Venus turns direct. But just to reiterate, it's in this little stellium. We've decided, our hearts are aligned, ready to go, and that trine to Mars is like a nice gentle like tug in a way. So it's like it's kind of like the little tugboat that's pulling us out to the river, so we can get on with it and move forward. So mid-month, this is April 12th. It's gonna feel like it's go time. Okay, essentially. So it's really gonna feel like it's go time. Um, Now, uh, the next thing on the list here, this is more of a uh, long-term thing, and you can add a week to this on each end if you want to use the true node. This is the mean node here, but basically speaking, most of April we have Saturn conjunct the North Node in Pisces. So remember, back in late January, early February, we had Neptune conjunct the North Node in Pisces. Okay, so now Neptune's moved on to Aries, and now Saturn is joining that North Node. So in a lot of sense, what was coming up in terms of our creativity, ideas that we really didn't ground in yet, late January, early February, whatever was coming up as possibilities and ideas, suddenly things get real. Okay, and so they're getting real right at that time that, again, Mercury and Venus go direct. So we're ready to go forward with our decisions and put our hearts all into it. Okay, and so think back to like late January, early February. What was floating around. That's really a good word to use. What was floating around in our ideas? What were we fantasizing about? What were we dreaming about, etc. This is really, again, speaks to that go time kind of energy, because where we go with this is kind of like there's kind of no going back, right? And I said that before, and there is a sense of strong commitment. So what we're committing to is kind of our highest ideals, our highest path. And with Neptune in Aries now, it's going to be easier to feel and know what that reason is that we're here for. Okay, and so there's a big turning point here in April for sure. So how that looks on the charts, there is Saturn North Node right there. Again, still with that same cluster, Venus, Mercury, freshly direct now in Pisces, and then it's still, Saturn's still making that sextile to Uranus. Okay, and it's also going to be in a wide square to Jupiter, as well as a nice flowing trine to Mars. Okay, so again, it's that tugboat again. Okay, so everything's kind of working in concert here. Like it's hard to even separate all these little pieces in April because it's all kind of one thing in a lot of ways, like I said before, except for that new moon that we'll talk about in a minute. But you can see, so the same themes kind of going on there. Next thing on the list. So now we know that Saturn is sextiling Uranus, and we know that Saturn's on the node. So obviously that node must be sextiling Uranus as well. That's what we have here. So we get into more like mid to late April into early May, and now we have a sense of Uranus. If we take it in isolation, sure, it's sextile the North Node, and that's a sense of, again, going forward in a new direction. Okay, but because Saturn is kind of holding it in check, it's not going forward fast. It's not going forward in a crazy way. It's just Saturn over here is keeping it in check. Okay, so again, all this cluster keeps coming up. Only at this point, Venus and Mercury have now entered Aries by the time we get to later part of April. And then the final thing on here, so again, those all kind of relate to each other in a lot of ways. The final thing we have here, there's a new moon. It's going to look a little different than those other charts. Okay, all of a sudden it's like a different world, and so that's the new moon right there, just about 8 degrees Taurus. Okay, and the ruler of Taurus being Venus. Venus in this case will be basically still in that conjunction with Saturn and the North Node in late Pisces at that point. So this again, so it's highlighting the idea of, again, being on board on a heart level, committed, heart-based, and ready to go forward. But notice it's also squaring Mars and Pluto. And so Mars will have entered Leo at that point. I think it enters Leo on like April 18th or something like that. And this was like the 27th, I think it was. So yeah, there'd be a few days into Mars and Leo. And Mars still hasn't gotten back to where it started its retrograde at 6 degrees Leo, but it's almost there at this point. and it's opposing Pluto. This Mars opposite Pluto started back in early November. Okay, and then it came back again, and actually in early November, Mars was in Cancer, Pluto was still in Capricorn. And then when it happened the second time in January, because Mars was retrograde, now Pluto had moved into Aquarius, and so it happened like this with Mars and Leo opposing Pluto and Aquarius. Okay, and now we have the third one that comes up here in late April, and it essentially happens within a day or so of that new moon in Taurus. Okay, so we've, by the time we get to late April, it's like we're opening up a new story. So mid-April is the completion of what we've been doing the last couple of months, reviewing on a heart level, on a mind level, what has held us back, what we need to release to move forward. Mid-April, we get to the point of decision making, and it's go time, it's commitment time. We're headed forward, okay. And then late April, now it's like, okay, now that we're on our road, headed there, wherever there is. Now this new moon comes in and says, all right, where is our excitement? Because now Mars is in Leo, and it wants to dig its heels in and start creating. And then, Pluto is in Aquarius. It's like this whole new world kind of energy. And it's like, knowing what we know now after reviewing everything and releasing everything and being ready to go, how are we going to align our creativity essentially to create something solid for ourselves going forward? So it's a fresh new moon that kind of exists outside of this energy that we are in right now. And so that is the summary for April, just to give you a glance again at all those things happening. Hopefully, whoever's watching this, hopefully you're coming to those decisions, coming to those conclusions, coming to those commitments, and it feels right for you. And you know what you got to do, you know what you got to commit to, and you get on it. That's the way it works. And astrology helps us know when it works. Okay. So thanks for joining me again. It's Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony. If you have any questions, want to leave any comments, please do. And if you are interested in seeing where these energies fall in your chart, like for example, where that cluster of planets is in late Pisces, where does that fall in your chart? What does that mean for you? Then do connect with me. We can always set up a personal consultation via Zoom, and we can go over it for you. So enjoy your April, and then be sure to watch my shorts. I do Instagram lives once a week. I also do my Facebook posts usually a few times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. So follow me on Facebook, Sovereign Harmony Astrology. Follow my Instagram, same thing, Sovereign Harmony Astrology, and you'll get more frequent updates. But as far as this format goes, I will be back at the end of April to talk about May.